Welcome to Business Writing Tune-Up, a session presented by, or for, Cushman & Wakefield Northmark, Unlock Your Potential 2014. The sign-in sheet is being passed around, so please sign in. As part of our vision for our company, Cushman & Wakefield Northmark is committed to make this a special place for our employees. One way we demonstrate that is through our commitment to supporting our employees' professional development opportunities like Unlock Your Potential. A special welcome to our C&W and Commerce employees joining us online today from all over the country. We welcome your interaction and questions throughout today's session. Our speaker today is Ben Shank. Ben is the owner of nationally recognized Writing Consultants, Inc. He has taught writing and has written professionally since 1975. Ben has delivered thousands of business and technical writing workshops in the United States, Canada, and England. And just a little side note, he has been used to be a professional magician. So we'll see if any tricks happen today. Please show a warm welcome to Ben Shank.
Thank you very much. Our 1 hour session, I promised you, is going to be 100% practical. My goal working with you is each of you will pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things you can do better with your writing. Before we get going, I want you to know I take it as a given that all of you can do a pretty great job sitting down to write a sentence. I said it to make sense, clear, grammatically correct. Yep, I'm sure you can do it. Yay! But what this session is about is cranking out communication after communication after communication to varied audiences so you get your points across better. So that's what it's about. I pride myself on creating a relaxed, positive learning environment. So at any point, if you disagree or have questions, trust me to weave in your questions or comments. So I will at the very end, like 5 minutes to 11, say, okay, we're wrapping up now. Any last concerns I should hear about, but you may have already voiced your concerns by the time we get to that point. You have a handy little handout. I'm going to walk you through it now. Does everybody have what I reflect? If you flip to page 2, before you flip the page, on the cover page, please note that I have my email address. Name of my company, writingconsultants@gmail.com. Should anybody have, including those of you in the room and those around the United States, anybody have questions, be sure to send me an email. With that question, remind me what group you were a part of, and I'd be glad to respond. Okay, if you turn to the next page now, page 2, where it says 5 techniques, that is what we're going to be spending our hour talking about. It is these 5 techniques. And the better job you do with these 5 techniques, the better job you're going to do getting your points across. So I'm going to give you the quick overview, and then we'll go through these one at a time. So thinking before you write. Isn't it true? It's a big temptation, given how busy you are, to crank your communications out. In other words, you don't stop to think. You get the fingers over the keyboard and start cranking. Now, if you're writing something that's really routine, it makes sense to me that you would not stop to think, hey, you already have a roadmap in your head. But conversely, anytime you're writing to a new audience, new readers, a diverse audience, a more complicated message, it's important to think before you write. Getting your main points early. Of everything we're about to talk about, for most people, this is the hardest one. A lot of people go, oh yeah, I state my main points early, but when I look at their communications, like, no you don't. So it sounds like important, it sounds kind of easy. In fact, about 4 out of 5, 3 out of 4 people really struggle with getting their main points stated early, and we'll get more into that. Using structure, anytime you have a whole bunch of details, hey folks, it's time to think about structure. And by structure, I simply mean you need to have an opening, you need to think how you're going to handle all those wonderful details, and then you need to think through what kind of closing, wrap-up, finish image your readers would appreciate. So that's the first 3 points. The fourth is being sure, whether it's an email or a report or a letter or a memo, whatever, that you go through and you edit it well, including every sentence. And we'll be talking about, well, what should you be looking at in every sentence. In that last one, the common email traps, I've been teaching a half-day email workshop for 20 years. And in the last 10 minutes or so of the workshop, we will be talking about these common email traps. I am going to be asking you to be thinking through your use of email, your colleagues' use of email, because there will be opportunities there for you to pitch in some your ideas about common traps and some common techniques that work for you. All right, that's an overview, a snapshot of what we're about to do. Now, I'd like to have you look at the bottom of page 2 where it says exercise. The idea of this exercise is thinking through those 5 points that I just touched on, that thinking before you write, stating your main point early, using structure, editing every sentence, be clear and concise, and avoiding email traps. Of those 5, if I asked you to pick one of those as being the one you think, yes, I could improve on that, I would like you to pick one of those and then turn to a colleague or colleagues in the room here and explain when you could start improving on that. And if you want to add how you might improve, but I just want you to identify which of these is the most likely place you could improve, and turn to a colleague, whether you know that person or not, and say, hey, this is the one thing I think I could improve on. Those of you who are not in this room, I'd like you to be identifying a specific of those 5 things you think you could do better, and be sure to have a conversation by the end of the day with somebody about when and how you could improve on it. All right, so is everybody in the room here willing to do that? So you pick one of those and turn to a colleague? Okay, very good. Have that conversation. I'll give you about 2 minutes for that. So pick something, pick somebody, and have that quick conversation. Number 2. It's a deep just depending around the country, they have this too. Cool. Thank you.
Most of them should. And I'm kind of chatting with them, too, to try to keep them.
I'll give you a half minute more. Well done, everybody. Well done. Thank you so much for diving in, having a quick chat. I'm now going to have you flip to page 3. At the top of page 3, there's an initial suggestion. And this initial suggestion is, yes, indeed, that you take seriously what we're about to cover. If you use these techniques as you draft and you edit, you'll end up saving time. A lot of people go, I don't have time to change my old habits. I have to forge ahead. Well, I hear you. Let's be honest with each other. Isn't it easy to just continue on doing things the same old way? I mean, it's a little bit like sometimes when you buy a new pair of shoes. Oh, they're not as comfortable as the old shoes, and you don't end up wearing those new shoes. Well, these new habits that we're about to walk you through, they really work, and they'll end up saving you time. Okay, we are about to get into the wonderful world of thinking before you write. So, the more important the communication is, the more important it is for you to stop and think. Now, you can use any of a bunch of different planning tools. I'd like to touch on a couple of them. I'm sure most of you have used them. One is having a conversation. You just had a conversation with a colleague now. The idea of before you sit down to write, having a conversation with a colleague, you'll say, hey, this afternoon I have to write an email that's going to my boss and a couple of his or her colleagues. So that's my audience, and the purpose is to educate them about property that we explored, and we're going to make a recommendation that we don't go ahead. That's my purpose. And there's about 3 most important issues I want to cover. So having a quick conversation with a colleague, that's an important planning tool. Another planning tool is the so-called brainstorming on paper, just jotting down some quick notes about what you're going to cover. That is a fine planning tool. You might want to check out the wonderful world of online brainstorming tools. I'm going to give you one recommendation that is not in your handout. I mention it because it's free. There are about 300 brainstorming online tools, and there's lots of them that are free. Google, brilliant people that they are, came up with a brainstorming tool called Koogle, with a C as in cow instead of G, and it is a free brainstorming tool, and it's quite easy to use, and a lot of people like it. So, thinking before you write. In the handout on that, underneath that heading, it says, don't start writing until you're sure what your main point is. So just doubling back to that business of having a conversation with a colleague. If you're having a conversation with a colleague and you find yourself kind of tongue-tied, like you can't state what your purpose is, what your main points are, you're not ready to start writing. So be sure you have a roadmap of what you're about to write before you start writing. Now, let me ask those of you in the room here, why do you think it is we so often shortchange the so-called planning stage, getting our thoughts and information organized before we start to write? Even when it's an important communication, it's complex, there's a lot of information, why do we so often, even in that situation, shortchange the planning stage? Any ideas?
Want to see progress right away?
Yeah, you want to see progress right away. Don't have time. Doesn't that sound about right? I don't need to tell you, we live in a culture that really values productivity and just thinking, what my main point is. Doesn't feel nearly as productive as getting your fingers over the keyboard and starting to crank it out. But you will actually save time and write at a higher quality level if you stop and think and get up that roadmap in your head or on a piece of paper before you start to write. Again, people tell themselves, I don't have time to plan. Well, yes, you do, because if you plan adequately, getting that roadmap laid out, you will win back whatever time you just spent. You'll draft it faster, and you'll spend less time editing. All right, so that is thinking before you write. Please flip to the next page. You can see on that next page, I'm doubling up number 2 and number 3. Number 2 is about what's on the screen here, stating your main point or points early. And then number 3 is getting into structure and openings. And obviously there's going to be an overlap between points 2 and 3. So the idea of stating your main point early, I mentioned, wow, this is going to be really hard for lots of people. What's the key issue? What makes it as challenging as it is? Well, for a lot of people, if you've been wrestling with something, you often have lots and lots and lots of details in your head, and your mind is kind of married to those details. And it's hard for your brain to jump up and come up with that sort of 30,000-foot view of what it's all about. There is a specific type of thinking skill called deductive thinking. It's high-level thinking, and for some people it's really easy to come up with that 30,000-foot overview, big picture statement. For lots of people it's not, especially if you've been working hard and have tremendous amount of details in your head. But that's your goal, is to come up with a clear, concise statement of what's ahead. So here would be, to give you a simple example, what I mean. Below is the history of the problem and 5 solutions. So you're not getting into the history details, you're not getting into the solution. It's a very quick snapshot. Now, how much detail, how many words you use to express what your main points are, that really will depend on the length of the communication. If you think about the length of your openings and your closings, they're a little bit like accordions. Obviously, the openings and closings get longer. If it's a long 20-page report, your readers expect an introduction that may be 3 or 4 paragraphs. If it's only a 5-paragraph email, maybe a 2-line opening would be appropriate. So openings and closings do vary in terms of length, but the idea of your readers, for most of what you send out, giving you about 3 seconds of reading time, that's an important concept I'm about to explore with you. So when you send out most of what you write, so by most I mean from your emails and other shorter documents, most readers want to spend about 3 seconds of their reading time absorbing whatever you've written to understand the gist of what it's all about. And if you think about your own experience, let's just focus now right on email. Most people, I assume this will be true for you as well, most people want to make a rapid decision about, is this communication in which of 3 categories? Really important, I need to read it right now. Really important, but I don't need to read it right now. And nope, not important, I never need to see it again. So most people want to decide within about 3 seconds which category most communications, especially emails, fit into. So let's have you experience the 3-second rule now. I'm going to ask you there on page 4 where it says A, subject ridiculous, spend 3 seconds reading to come up with what the gist is here. So go ahead, I will count them out. Start reading that A, subject ridiculous email. 1001, 1002, 1003. Okay, in 3 seconds of reading time, did you feel like you could confidently say what this was about? Other than somebody who was not very happy. Nope, it's a little hard to say. All right, so this one failed the 3-second rule. Now, let's give you another shot. That's the one that says, subject, we need to solve our release problems. I'll give you another 3 seconds of reading time to come up with the gist. So go ahead, start reading. 1001, 1002, 1003. You feel quite a bit more confident saying what the main point is? Well, now you've just experienced the 3-second rule. I'm going to seriously ask you from now on to be sure, as best you possibly can, especially for your email, that they succeed in applying the 3-second rule. And what does that mean practically you need to do differently? For a lot of people, what they do to apply this is they write their email however they want to write it, and then they go back and they go, okay, in my opening, did I actually tell my reader early, in as few words as I possibly can, what the gist is? Now, sometimes the answer is no, and therefore you have to write it. Other times you go, oh, you know what? I stated the main point there at the bottom, and then you just take that main point and bring it up to the top. So thinking that through and applying as best you can. Now, 3-second rule for emails, for a 2-page letter, and may be the 6-second rule. So expand that number of seconds accordingly. But even in a 10-page report, readers want to learn quickly what's this all about. before they get into the details. Okay. Any concerns, questions about the good old 3-second rule before we push ahead? All right, very good. Over on page 5, we are going to get into how to handle the details. The idea of details, just think about your experience. Whenever you open up a communication and there's a lot of details, isn't it true that sometimes your heart sinks a little bit? Like, oh man, a lot of information, I don't have time to absorb a lot of information. So the number one thing people are looking for when you are sharing information with them is what you're seeing on page 5 with the body. There are 3 basic tips that I'd like to share with you about the body. So creating bite-sized pieces, breaking information into small attractive bites. You want to keep your list and your paragraphs to averaging about 5 lines on paper and about 3 lines for your email. So if you'll humor me by grabbing your pens, if you want to jot down paragraphs, the average is it says there are 3 to 4 lines in your email and 5 to 6 averaging paragraphs, averaging 5 to 6 lines in your what's on paper. Now, you notice that I also put in the word list. It's like, you may go, oh, wait a minute, what if my list has 8 list items? Well, I'd like to walk you through that. And I'm going to do this off the flip chart. Let's say that is the lines I'm about to draw each represent list items with a bunch of words. Okay? And I'm going to do 7 lines. We do know that looks like 7, I think. Anytime we have 6 or more list items, we do know that the internal list items tend to get shortchanged in terms of energy and attention. So when you get up to about this number, it's time to think about breaking that list up into shorter lists. How? By using subheadings. Now, I'm just going to put down the word internal and external. So you had some internal problems and some external problems. I'm about to ask you a trick question, so brace yourself. Okay. All right. So there it was going to be, you had a whole bunch of problems, but okay, hey, I could break this up into just internal and external. That breaking up is going to make the list look more attractive on the screen or page. And of course, there'll be less of that short-changing of energy and attention of list items. And your reader will be educating themselves by seeing the subheading what's underneath it, so they will absorb the information faster. So plus, plus, plus. Now, here's that trick question. And actually, it truly is a trick question, because I'm a kind of a kind-hearted instructor. I suggest you don't answer, but if you really feel bold and fun, go ahead. Internal, external. Which of those should we start with? You're so smart. Now, why do I say it's a trick question? Because there's no way for you to really be able to answer until I tell you who the audience is. Whenever we are writing, as one of our responsibilities as writers is to go, okay, what are the chunks of information I want to share? And then, what should the order be? And there's no way to figure out that order until you thought about your readers. So I'm just going to spend a moment talking about the order of the information. Which is the second point there on page 5. The order of the information. Anytime you have put the information in the order that corresponds to your reader's priorities, values, that's a beautiful thing. Why? You are conveying to your reader, hey reader, I know where you're coming from, I'm on your wavelength, I know your priorities, I want to make this make sense and have a good flow for you. Conversely, anytime we put things in the order, maybe that of importance we think is important, but it doesn't correspond to what your readers think is the most important order, now we are sending a message of reader indifference. And we're pushing our readers away. So always thinking that through. So let's just say for this example here that this was going to our boss, and we knew our boss is very concerned about internal issues. Okay, we'll start with internal. But if the opposite was true, our boss was the reader and the boss cared most about external problems, well, we would flip that order. So always thinking through the order throughout the whole document and within any section. All right. Now, the last one, item on page 5, is designing for fast reader access. The idea of fast reader access, what does that mean here? Well, basically, what it's getting into is the idea of good use of subheadings and good use of bulleted lists so that your readers can zoom to the information that they care about. If I can have you flip now to the next page, page 6, we are going to wrap up the structure discussion talking about closing. Now, closing, just think about it realistically. When you are sitting down to write something, you're obviously trying to crank it out, get it completed, and sent on its merry way as soon as you can. And isn't it true when it comes to the idea of a closing is, oh gosh, I'm out of time. I just want to kick this thing out the door and be done with it. So we as writers have a tendency to shortchange our closings. And I'm going to walk you through the idea of a more effective way to approach your closings now. As you can see on page 6, it says closing should recap and connect. So as recapping, giving them a summary of what they had, reminding reader about important next steps, and then avoiding cliches. Of everything we're about to talk about regarding closing, this business of avoiding cliches, I think is probably the most important. So you can see there in the handout where it lists that first 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the cliches, and as it says there in the handout, these have been around for a long time. And I do mean, when I use the word cliche, I mean these words in this exact order. That's what makes them a cliche. There's absolutely nothing wrong with, say, hey, do you have questions? There's nothing wrong with that, but you don't want to stop there. And the key as to avoiding cliches is yes, get specific. So you can see that that same 1, 2, 3, 4, I have now revised them and got specific. So that first one, instead of reading, if you have any questions, please feel free to call, which is the cliche, now reads, if you have any questions about our revised schedule, please contact me. Please humor me and grab your pens, and please underline that word about. So the next time you are making an offer to help, if you have any questions, if you need clarification, if you have concerns, remember that wonderful word about. Put in that word about and then go, what might those real readers have questions, concerns about, and then mention that. It turns out if you make a specific offer to help, you come across as sincere. If you use one of the cliches, you come across as insincere. One of the ways to think of a closing verbal is a verbal handshake. You're putting some words there that make your reader think that you want to be working with them closely, successfully, and so forth. So you want to stay away from the cliches. So you don't. It's not an effective verbal handshake. Now, I always like to toss out that if the tone needs to be more formal, you wouldn't use about, you'd use regarding, but you do the same thing. And given that most of you communicate both verbally speaking and writing, I'll just quickly mention this on the phone and in person. It turns out you tend to be more effective when you make open-ended offers to help. What other questions could I help you with? That open-ended, that tends to be better in person on the phone. In writing, the opposite is true. That the specific offer to help tends to elicit a more positive response. All right, we did a quick zip through for opening. State your main point early. The body using that idea of designing it for fast reader access, logical order, and bite-sized pieces. Now we've chatted a little bit about what makes for effective closing. So this is the idea of using structure. Any concerns about using structure about anything I've covered? Well, I'm now going to have you flip to page 7, where it says at the top 4 what kind of sentences, excuse me, what kind of sentences do readers prefer, and concise ones. And you can see that on page 7, I've given you a box of 5 entries, and the top 2 are clear and concise. And I'm going to walk you through clear and concise, and then we'll go through each of them. And I'm going to have everyone, including the people who are not in this room, humor me, because I've heard this really cool technology can follow me wherever I go. So I'm pretty excited. So I'm going to walk back here, so you're going to be cricking your necks a little bit. Just bear with me. So let's talk about writing clearly. The idea of writing clearly, here I am. Writing clearly, obviously, yeah, of course, I want to write clearly. But every sentence needs to be clear. After you have drafted and you're going to edit, you should be holding yourself accountable so every sentence is clear and easy to understand. It turns out you should first edit for clarity and then edit for conciseness. So every sentence you should go, did I use the words, the expressions that my intended audience is going to understand? Or do I need to use different terminology, different language that gives the intended audience to understand? Well, that's clarity. Conciseness, to be honest with you, I worry for this push for being really concise, or it's all going to end up. Indeed, though, the very idea that 5 years ago you expressed using 20 words, today you should express that same idea probably in about 15 words. Now, let me throw out a question to you, and this is not a trick question. You can feel more safe and secure answering it. Can we be too concise? Can we be too concise sometimes? Sure, of course. What can be some of the downsides when we are too concise?
Leaving out information.
Okay, we're leaving out information that our reader needs. Oh gosh, that reader may think they've gotten the complete package, and so therefore she or he may be making decisions, entering into discussions with incomplete information. All right, so we haven't put in enough words to convey our message adequately. Any other downsides to being super concise?
What about the tone?
The tone, excellent, very good.
Feel very friendly.
Yeah, very good. The tone. Thank you, Carrie. The idea of being super concise, we're all busy. I'm sure you've noticed, especially your boss or your boss's boss, are like, boy, she or he is really concise. We sometimes, if we are super concise, have a tone problem. And I always like to trot out this very quick story of training. My company trains all over the place. And about 5 years ago, very famously now in my mind, I was teaching in New Jersey, and a big body lifter kind of manager asked me, is a one-word email okay? And he was an intimidating guy, and I was intimidated a bit, so I hedged and I said, well, it depends. What was that word? And he said, no. I did a quick walkthrough with him. I said, okay, you get the A++ on getting your message across. You know, that was a concise, clear message. You got it across. But every communication, though, every communication works on two levels: the information level and the emotional level. How did your relationship with that person turn out after you sent that on? And instantly, his face went to being, proud and strong, and I always am in charge, to a look of true regret. And he said, that guy that I said no to would not look me in the eye for 2 weeks. So he had succeeded being super concise, but as Carrie suggested, sometimes we have a tone problem, and we push people away. So that's the other downside for you to be aware of. Yes, readers love it when you're clear and concise every sentence, but sometimes we do push it. We can't push it too far. All right. Relatively quickly now, the other 3 entries there on page 7, correct, conversational, complete. Correct, this whole business of proofreading, I do teach an 8-hour proofreading workshop. It's really exciting. Of course, proofreading is really hard work. We seldom budget adequate time to proofread successfully. In this little training session, we don't have time to get into the ins and outs of successful proofreading in any great detail, but let me just share 2 quick tips. First, and if you want to take a quick little note here, first is how important for successful proofreading a cool-off period is. Yes, whatever you've written and you've edited, put it aside before you proofread it. The more important the document is, the longer the cool-off period needs to be. And the other tip I'd like to share is the idea of using a straight edge. So you could, if you've never done this before, then I encourage you to try it out. If you're already doing it, great. But you grab any straight edge, and I'm just going to use this piece of paper here, and you put it underneath the first line and go line by line, and so that straight edge is blocking out all the rest of the print, and it helps your eyes focus on what's right in front of them. All right, so that's any concerns about proofreading any of you would have, that any specific types of proofreading issues anybody would have that they'd like to raise? And it's fine if you don't. Okay, cool. Yeah. The tone. You note the very careful wording here. Is my tone sufficiently friendly? So, of course, it's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to tone. Sometimes we want to be very formal in our tone, and sometimes we want to be more friendly. And by picking the tone that makes sense, given the purpose of the communication with the audience. But it is something for you to be thinking through every sentence. How am I doing in terms of my tone? Am I sufficiently conversational? One fine tuning of tone, being sufficiently conversational, is being consistent. It's fairly common for people to be inconsistent in their tone. In other words, for the most part, most of a email, memo, letter, report, most of it is written at the same tone level in terms of conversational or formality. But every once in a while, there's a spike upward in terms of formality, just in the choice of a word or a phrase, or a spike downward, being overly conversational. Last Friday, I was teaching a class at the University of Minnesota, and all of a sudden, I started, and it's towards the end of the day, and I was getting tired, I started trotting out 3 and 4 and 5 syllable words, and in my head I was going, what's going on here? I was using overly formal language, and the only word I can remember was stipulate. I was like, stipulate. So I spiked up in terms of my being overly formal. Another way in your writing you can jump down in terms of your being inconsistent in your tone is using idioms. So idioms are expressions where the exact meaning is not of the words, it's different what you mean, for example, between a rock and a hard place, hit it out of the park. What do you think the problem is in using idioms in our writing? What is the problem? Why is that not a good idea? Wonderful. That's one of the key reasons we should do our darndest to stay away from using idioms, is that the person to whom you're writing, or the people to whom you're writing, they may never have heard that idiom before, or, and this happens all the time, they thought it meant something different. So staying away from it, that's one reason. Another is tone. Usually, using an idiom causes your tone to drop down and being super conversational. So easy for me to stand up here and say, no, don't use idioms. But boy, we use idioms all the time. We don't hear them for being the very sort of informal language that they are. But you should do your best to stay away. And then complete, staying away from writing in fragments, write in grammatically complete sentences. Any ideas why that's a good idea? For the most part, write in grammatically complete sentences. I'll give you a couple tips. First, if any of your readers don't have English as their first language, sentence fragments can be baffling. And the other is a month later, a year later, 2 years later, when somebody looks at what you wrote, that fragment also may be baffling. So it's a good habit, for the most part, to write in grammatically complete sentences, even when you're rushed. If you think about the little bulleted list, that's one place where everybody expects you to use sentence fragments. So that's one place it's just fine. But other than that, in paragraphs, writing grammatically complete sentences. Okay, we are now turning the corner to the wonderful work of writing clearly as you can. And I'd like to have you turn to page 8 here. And we're going to talk about this business of writing at a certain grade level. If you notice at the top of page 8, I'll just read it out loud so we're all in this room and everywhere on the same page as it were. So in your writing, you should aim for an average sentence length of 15 words or less, and at a grade level of 12, and that's the difficulty of New York Times articles. Now, for those of you here in the room, is this the first time any of you have heard, just with a show of hands, first time you've heard about your writing being described as being written at a specific grade level? That's true for anybody? Okay, about 8 hands went up. The idea of writing at a certain grade level has been around since the 1920s. The textbook publishing industry in the 1920s invented the statistical tools that grab a hold of text and analyze it for the grade level at which it's appropriate. And obviously they needed a tool like that so when they're working with with writers of textbooks, they could go, this is destined for a 10th grade class, and you're writing up to 12th grade level or 8th grade level. You need to make the appropriate adjustments. By the 1950s, almost every newspaper, every magazine, and starting in the federal government, started to get into this. And today, the idea of using the readability indexes, the statistical tool that tells you your grade level, every state in the United States has right on the law books for financial products and insurance products, policies and so forth, statutes that say these must be written at grade 7.8 or lower, or something like that. I used to have such fun here in Minnesota because the very statute that said insurance policies had to be written at 7.8 or lower, that statute was one sentence that was 128 words long, and so it was off the Richter scale in terms of readability, telling people to write simply. So, and they have since revised it. So you can see the to find out, it says there, to find out your grade level, use the question button in Word documents and then type in show readability statistics and then follow the steps. There on page 8, you can see we have a couple of fours, and And the first one is one 29-word sentence, and when you use the readability index, it comes out at the 20th grade level, which means 8 years of schooling after high school. Just by breaking it into shorter sentences, it drops the grade level down to 14. And to be honest with you, these statistical tools are not all that precise. So someplace around 12, 11, 12, that's 20. The next example, the second example, is a masterpiece, a 69-word sentence. Hooray! And of course, readers today kind of freak out when we try to share a long sentence with them. They just very seldom stay on board. And so the grade level is super high. And now I've just broken that into 5 sentences and brought the grade level down to 9. So by walking you through that page, that's my way of saying to you, hey, one of the simplest ways to get your grade level down is to break longer sentences up into shorter sentences. All right, our last topic, good old email. And you can see if you turn to page 9, the top question there is, when is email the right choice? And I have the little graphics, a pencil on paper, a telephone, very happy person, evidently. People shaking hands, representing the face-to-face, and then, of course, the monitor to represent email. I would like to have a lightning fast discussion here, and so this will be really fun for all of you and me. I'm going to divide you up into some groups. Could I ask the 3 of you to be a group, and the 5 of you to be a group, and the 4 of you to be a group, the 4 of you to be a group, and oh gosh. Would you be a part of their group? And all right. Within these respective groups, see if I can what's that? There was not a lot of it. This whole business is dividing people up to groups. All right. So this group, I'd like you to have a quick discussion about when picking up the phone is smartest. Are you all here? Would you have a discussion on when face-to-face is best? That you're wondering. I'd like you to have a discussion about when picking up the phone is better than email, so there's going to be overlap. And I think everyone in the room and afar will agree this group over here are judicial scholars. So I'm going to have you have a discussion when putting it on paper is better than using email. So within each group, I'd like you to have someone volunteer their services to be the scribe spokesperson, and you're going to have a marvelous 2.5, 3 minutes or something like that to have a discussion, whichever mode of getting the message across. What kind of messages, what kind of situations would it be better to use, to get phone or face-to-face or paper rather than using email? How am I doing with the instructions now? Good enough? That'll do?
Yeah, that'll work.
All right, so go ahead. I'll give you about 2.5, 3 minutes. First thing, have someone volunteer their services and describe me.
Oh, hey, Gordon.
Could you just
Chat a little bit. Yep.
Well, chat and just ask them. Does anybody have any including questions?
Okay.
I'd be happy to weave that in. But for sure, let me know. Here we are about 10 minutes to within about prior to 3 minutes to the end. Okay?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, very good.
I find myself saying a lot of explanation.
I'm sorry?
How do you feel about explanation in email?
No. For the most part, just
I know.
and you talk but other than that, like we don't have this message.
probably should see them more, you know? Because I think if you're not, like, it feels like you don't have that information because it's not so harsh, you know? And when you're sort of used to communicating in a way that's soft or nice, so you feel like it's so cold. So, yeah, I just noticed that, like, a lot of, like, in my emails, if I reread them, I feel like if they don't have, like, an I exclamation point each, that I found that I hate the word.
Good night, chat.
But I'm just saying, I think it's like a social relationship.
Yeah. You have 1 more minute.
Yeah.
No, we're doubling up. Very good.
They might.
All right. It's time to wrap up. Please wrap up your discussion. All right. We are now going to very quickly, because we have exactly 7.5 minutes to go. Very quickly, we're going to touch on what you have learned in your discussion. Let's start with the oldest way of getting a message across, the face-to-face. So the team that has face-to-face, the Scribe spokesperson, would you tell us in a nice loud voice what your team came up with? When is face-to-face better than using email?
We thought it was good when you need to deliver either good news or bad news.
Excellent. Very good.
Personal information that maybe you don't want a paper trail for. Sometimes there's clients that don't want a paper trail, so
Good.
they've asked you to not put it in writing or leave voicemail, that kind of
Great.
thing. If you need to resolve a conflict,
Good.
if you need a quick response or something immediate so that you can continue on with your task,
Sure.
and if there's not a high level of risk of clarity, if there's lots of steps that need to be followed, it might be good to put it in writing, but it's just a question, you know the person will understand what you need.
Yeah, cool. Very good. Not leaving the so-called electronic trail, so important to think. Almost every company that I've worked for has had horror stories about emails that came back to haunt them. A company in the last year lost a lawsuit for $400,000 because of an email, and the person couldn't even remember writing it initially. So if you don't want to have an electronic trail, don't have it face-to-face. All right. I did ask 2 teams to tackle the phone. I'm going to ask this incredibly splendid team to walk us through when is picking up the phone smarter, and obviously there's going to be overlap with face-to-face. What did you come up with? And then I'll ask this team to listen carefully and see if you have anything more to add. So go ahead. In a nice loud voice. Did you get a Scribe?
So if there's
Lots of information.
on the phone, but with that piece, we also talk about how maybe it's better to call and talk through whatever it is you communicate or discuss, but also following it up with
Very good. Very good. So following up with the email, and that's actually at the bottom of the page here, document. So very good.
depending what the conversation is.
All right.
When it's a negative issue, probably.
Sure.
When you need to address
Cool.
another where
Another kind of issue with the tone is essential. Good.
and then when you say like really technical reason, it's kind of a non-essential, not
All right. Some
high priority.
lower priority, quick and easy. Okay. Cool. Very good. Anything to add? This team? Did they cover most of it?
Yeah, I know in our building it's highly customer service. Considered more personal.
All right. So picking up the phone can feel like better customer service, more personable. Having a nice, rich mix of face-to-face, phone and email is a smart idea from a customer service point of view and from a team productivity point of view. Our legal scholars, when is it a good idea to put it on paper?
I guess there's
Go for it.
lots of facts and information like a report,
A report, okay, lots of facts.
something like legal.
Legal, have to have a signature. Okay, very good. And I'm shocked that you forgot the handwritten thank you note. Just teasing. But that is something to consider. All right, very good. All right, well, we are going to wrap up now in about 3 minutes. And Gary, any questions from the field? All right, very good. If I could have you flip to page 10. Here's some email etiquette. You'll note at 1 through 7, starting with keeping the email concise and clear. Number 3, avoiding flaming. Email, as it says on the screen here, is a hotbed of tone problems. Number 4 there, avoiding things with uncut professionalism. And then at the bottom there, number 7, yes, you don't want to be the professional whose proofreading ability bumps up after hitting the send button. We have an example of what using various techniques that we've discussed can look like there on page 11. I'm just going to draw your attention to the subheadings, payment issues, to shipping dates. Yes, you should be using subheadings in any email that has more than one topic, just like we just seen here. If you want to close to the last, go to the last page, page 12, where it talks about editing and proofreading. Yes, even your emails. The primary technique for proofreading emails is it says read out loud. By that I mean to sort of move your lips, sub-vocalize. That forces your eyes to see what's right on the screen. You just wrote it. You know what you intended to write. So your brain is going to be busy telling your eyes what to see. But if you read it mumble aloud, your eyes will be forced to see what's actually on the screen. And then the additional techniques in the cool-off period is there. It's time for you to do something very practical. At the very bottom of 12 is to create an action plan. I'd like everyone here in the room and those of you listening around the country to please pick out at least one, if not 2 things we covered. And a lot of people tend to flip back to remind themselves what we just covered. Please pick out 1 or 2 things. You go, I could do better at this, and just make that commitment to yourself to implementing it as soon as you can. So I'm now going to give you just 1 minute to think through of everything we covered, jot something down, and then a minute from now we'll go into the final wrap. Okay, very good. I am going to ask. I just like that because we do have a minute and a half to go. I am going to ask for a quick sampling from the room of what you jotted, what some of you jotted under number 12. So from the 5 of you, would one of you mention what did you put down on the number at the bottom of page 12?
Stop using cliches.
Mary is going to stop using cliches in our closing. Excellent. From the 3 of you, or the 4 of you, the 3 of you and the 4 behind, one of you just tell us what did you jot down at the bottom of 12?
Cool-off period.
The cool-off period. Boy, you can be productive. You can move to something else, and then after that cool-off period, come back and proofread with more of a fresh eye. And just to finish up, a back 4 of you, and one of you be so kind as to tell us what you jotted down.
Read it aloud.
Read it aloud. It's a wonderful proofreading technique. At times, you may go, well, I can't do that. My colleagues will think I've lost my mind. But I have a news flash for you. They may have decided that you lost your mind long ago. You're not going to lose any ground. So I want to thank everybody. You're a really easy, fun group to work with. Should you have follow-up questions, you'll have 30 seconds. No, I'm just kidding. You will have 30 seconds right now, but remember my email address to send them afterwards. So any last concerns, questions before we wrap up? All right, well done. Give you guys